All right, goats. I want to start this with a question that sounds kind of ridiculous. What does someone have to do to deserve food? How about healthcare, shelter, education? What exactly do you have to accomplish before society decides you're worthy of staying alive? Because we've created this strange moral system where basic human needs have become rewards for successful participation in the economy. If you're doing well, congratulations. You earned them. If you're struggling, we don't immediately ask what happened. We ask, what did you do wrong? Didn't you work hard enough? Didn't you go to school? Did you have kids too young? Did you spend too much money? Did you get addicted? Didn't you save? Didn't you plan? Didn't you hustle? And sometimes people, they absolutely do make terrible fucking decisions. I've made plenty of my own, but here's what bothers me. We've taken economic outcomes and turned them into judgments about human character. We don't just say someone is poor, we want to know whether they're deserving poor. And I think that's incredibly useful to a system that doesn't want us asking a much more dangerous question. Why does poverty exist alongside extraordinary wealth in the first place? So this evening, I don't want to talk about charity. I want to talk about something more fundamental. Why the fuck did we decide human dignity needed a price tag? Poverty has been turned into a character flaw. There's a story America loves telling about poverty. Successful people made good choices. Poor people made bad choices. It's wonderfully simple. And that's exactly the problem. Because if poverty is primarily an individual moral failure, we don't have to examine anything else. Wages, housing costs, healthcare, education, childcare, generational wealth, union power, disability, where someone was born, what opportunities existed there. None of that disappears. We just don't have to talk about it. Instead, we examine the poor person. Why didn't you succeed? And notice how differently we treat success. Somebody becomes wealthy, and we'll talk about their intelligence, their discipline, their sacrifice, and hard work. We very, very rarely conduct the same investigation into everything that helped them. Schools, employees, infrastructure, family, loans, public investment, mentors, fucking luck. Nobody succeeds alone. But we've built a culture where success is treated as individual achievement, while failure is treated as individual responsibility. That's really fucking convenient. Because once you convince people that poverty is evidence of bad character, helping people starts looking like rewarding bad behavior. Now you've transferred an economic question into a moral one. And suddenly the struggling worker isn't somebody getting fucked by the system. There's somebody you've been told to judge. And that's powerful. Because people who are judging each other aren't organizing with each other. We have confused market value with human worth. I believe in work. I've worked my entire adult life and a lot of my childhood from 14 years old. I believe different jobs can have different economic values. A surgeon and a cashier don't have to make the same amount of money for me to believe that both deserve dignity. That's not the argument. The problem begins when the market stops determining the price of somebody's labor and starts determining the value of the person. Think about the language we use. Low-skilled worker, unskilled labor, minimum wage worker, as though the paycheck describes the human being receiving it. Here's something capitalism is very good at doing, putting a price on things. Labor has a price, land has a price, medicine has a price, housing has a price, food has a price, time has a price. Fine, markets do that. But markets, they're not moral philosophers. The market, it can tell you what somebody is willing to pay for an hour of your labor. It cannot tell you what your life is worth. Those are completely different fucking questions. And when we confuse them, something ugly happens. People with less money begin receiving less dignity. The homeless person becomes invisible. The minimum wage worker becomes disposable. The uninsured person gets asked why they didn't find a better job. Meanwhile, wealth, it becomes looking suspiciously like evidence of virtue. If you're rich enough, apparently you must be doing the right thing. Bullshit. Money measures money. That's it. Market value is not human worth. And a society that can't distinguish between the two eventually starts treating poverty like permission to be fucking cruel. We are obsessed with the possibility that somebody might get something they don't deserve. This one, man, it drives me fucking insane. Talk about feeding hungry people, and somebody immediately finds the hypothetical asshole. What about the guy who refuses to work? What about the person committing welfare fraud? What about the woman buying something I don't approve while receiving assistance? What about the addict? What about the irresponsible parent? Apparently, before we can discuss helping millions of people, we first have to solve the case of imaginary asshole number 47. Yes, people abuse systems. People lie. People take advantage. Welcome to fucking humanity. Rich people do that shit too. But we react very different depending on who's receiving the help. Give a struggling family a few $100s in food assistance, and suddenly we're forensic accountants. What did they buy? Do they really need it? Could they work more? But you give a corporation millions in subsidies, and now we're discussing economic development. Rescue a major financial institution, and we're protecting the economy. Give a poor person health care, and suddenly we're worried about dependency. That's not merely hypocrisy. That's class ideology. We've been trained to scrutinize assistance downward while treating assistance upward as economic policy. And I'm willing to make a moral choice here. I'd rather feed 10 people and discover afterward that one of them could have afforded dinner than create a system so punitive that the other 9 go hungry, proving that they deserve food every fucking time. Because here's the question we almost never ask. How much suffering are we willing to tolerate just to make sure nobody receives something they didn't earn? My answer is a hell of a lot less than we're tolerating right fucking now. Personal responsibility doesn't explain away structural power. And this is where somebody inevitably says, Kevin, what about personal responsibility? This fucking Randian bullshit people like to throw. Fine, let's talk about it. Personal responsibility matters. People make bad decisions. I've made plenty, as I said. You probably have too. Addiction, it destroys lives. Crime hurts people. People waste opportunities. People fuck up financially. None of that magically disappears because I'm a socialist. But personal responsibility and structural analyses aren't opposites. I can ask why somebody made a bad decision and ask why one bad decision destroyed their entire fucking life. That's the distinction. 2 people can make the exact same mistake. One has wealthy parents, savings, healthcare connections, and a safe place to land. They recover. The other doesn't. They fall. Same mistakes, different consequences. Then we look at the second person and say, see, choices have consequences. Of course they fucking do. But apparently consequences have a sliding scale depending on how much money your family has. That's not accountability. That's inequality pretending to be morality. I want people responsible for their choices. I also want a society where fucking up once doesn't condemn somebody to permanent poverty. Those ideas they're not contradictory. The people at the top get a very different version of failure. And here's where the class argument becomes impossible for me to ignore. When ordinary people fail, we call it irresponsibility. When powerful institutions fail, we call it a crisis. A worker can't pay their bills? Budget better. A giant corporation gets in trouble? We start discussing whether it's too important to fail. Both sides of the aisle are guilty of this. A poor person needs government assistance? Dependency. A profitable industry gets subsidies? Investment. A family can't get fucking housing? They can't afford housing? They should have made better choices. You know, investors speculate on housing and help price families out of communities? That's just the market. Do you see the pattern? Individualize the suffering at the bottom. Socialize the risk at the top. And then tell everybody capitalism rewards merit. That's the part I reject. Not because I hate successful people, I don't. I want people to succeed. I want people to build businesses, invent shit, make money, have nice homes, take vacations, enjoy your lives. What I reject is the idea that somebody else's desperation is necessary to make that success meaningful. Your house doesn't become less valuable because someone else isn't homeless, right? Your healthcare doesn't become worse because somebody else gets treatment, right? Your dinner doesn't taste any fucking differently because another family got to eat, right? We don't need suffering to make success valuable. Dignity, it should be the floor, not the prize. So what am I actually arguing for? Not equal outcomes, not everybody receiving the same paycheck, not everybody living in the same house, not some gray fucking dystopia where everybody gets identical shoes, you know? I'm talking about a floor, food, healthcare, education, shelter, basic security, a genuine opportunity to participate in society. And yes, I think we can afford it. We don't need to tax more. We need to audit the federal government and reappropriate our tax dollars as it is. The question isn't whether a wealthy country possesses enough resources to prevent enormous amounts of unnecessary suffering. The question is what we've decided deserves priority. That's political, that's economic, and that's moral. Because budgets aren't just spreadsheets. They're statements about what we as citizens value. And when somebody tells me guaranteeing basic necessities would make people lazy, I have another question. What exactly are we afraid will happen if people aren't desperate? Maybe they'll refuse shitty wages. Maybe they'll leave abusive employers. Maybe they'll organize. Maybe they'll take risks. Maybe they'll go back to school. Maybe they'll tell a boss who's exploiting them to go fuck themselves. And suddenly, the conversation about dependency looks a little goddamn different. Because economic insecurity doesn't only create suffering, it creates leverage. A worker who will lose health care if they quit isn't negotiating with their employer from equal ground. A worker one missed paycheck away from homelessness isn't particularly free to tell the boss no. That's why economic security isn't the enemy of freedom. For millions of people, it may be one of the only things that makes freedom actually usable. So I'll come around where I started here. What does somebody have to do before they deserve dignity? My answer is nothing. Not because choices don't matter, not because work doesn't matter, not because everybody deserves everything they want, but because I refuse to believe that being poor makes somebody less human. And I refuse to accept a system that tells struggling people their suffering is entirely their fault, while powerful people receive every fucking advantage society can provide and call themselves self-fucking made. Nobody is self-made. Some of us got help from family, some of us got help from teachers, some of us got help from friends, co-workers, government programs, the military, public schools, unions, mentors, strangers. Somebody opened a fucking door for you. And some people got more doors than others. Recognizing that doesn't diminish what you've accomplished. It should make you grateful. And maybe gratitude shouldn't end with saying thank you. Maybe gratitude means holding the fucking door open for the person behind you. I don't think society owes you success. I don't think society owes you luxury. I don't think society owes you happiness. But I do believe a civilization should be judged partly by what happens to the person who loses. The person who fucked up. The person who got sick, the person who got laid off, the person who was born without the advantages somebody else had. Because eventually most of us are going to need somebody. And when that day comes, I hope nobody makes you prove you're worthy of being helped. Human dignity shouldn't be the prize waiting at the end of a successful life. It should be the fucking starting line. Take care of each other. Simplify. Thanks for watching.